The Newsday continues here on One News Now. I'm Riza Diaz. More tourist destinations in the country have eased travel requirements for visitors. According to Cebu Pacific, several tourist destinations waived the RT-PCR test requirement for fully vaccinated individuals. Among these are Bohol, Butuan, Cebu, Clark, Dumaguete, Misamis Oriental, Osamis, San Jose, and Tacloban. However, some still require a negative swab test result such as Boracay, Camiguin, Kawayan, Coron, Cotabato, Legazpi, as well as Puerto Princesa, Siargao, Surigao, and Tuguegarao. President Duterte has yet to decide on the next chief of the Philippine National Police. Interior Secretary Eduardo Año said that the president will choose from 5 PNP generals included in the short list he submitted. Among those who are possibly included in the list are PNP Deputy Chief for Administration, Joselito Vera Cruz, Deputy Chief for Operations, Efraim Israel Dixon, NCRPO Chief Vicente Danao Jr., and Director for Operations Rodel Sermonia. But Sermonia had earlier denied that he is being considered as PNP chief. Current PNP chief Guillermo Elizar is set to retire on November 13 as he reaches 56 years old. The government is eyeing to make vaccination mandatory in the country to increase inoculation drives or nationwide. Greg Gregorio with the details.
Government is now mulling making vaccination mandatory. Vaccine Star Carlito Gavez said they are now recommending this to the president.
We have to implore yung massive vaccination. We are recommending it, and also the private sector is also with us.
The move has been gaining support among Filipinos.
May layo tayo sa mga sakit nga para maproteksyonan ng mga katawan natin.
Mas okay siya dahil sa chances na maging immune ka sa sakit na yan is getting higher.
Importante yon, sir, kasi para masigurado natin na ligtas yung kami na mga nagsiserve sa kanila.
Even the health department, which pushed back in the past, is now supporting mandatory vaccination.
Kailangan we will reach that certain protection across the population, no? Yung tinatawag na herd immunity o yung population protection. Dito po pumasok yung pag-uusap tungkol sa mandatory vaccination.
But should it be made mandatory, the DOH clarifies it will only be for vulnerable senior citizens and those working in face-to-face settings. But the mandate will require a law. That's why the Justice Department is now studying how to make possible. Vaccination remains slow outside NCR, which has inoculated 88% of its population. Regions like Barm, Bicol, Socsargen, Mimaropa, and the Zamboanga Peninsula are lagging behind.
Dapat ready yung ating mga areas to receive some of the vaccine. Now we are giving targets para maka-achieve ng at least 1 million to 1.5 million per day.
The DOH plans to conduct a 3-day national vaccination program by the end of the month.
We are going to expand vaccination sites. Maglalagay po tayo sa mga department stores, sa mga common areas. Maglalagay din po tayo sa iba't ibang mga lugar kung saan patuloy na pumupunta ang mga tao. We are also enjoining and we have already coordinated with the different medical societies para matulungan po tayo dito.
Operational guidelines are being ironed out, while LGUs, private sector, and NGOs have also been met for the planned mass vaccination. For News 5, Greg Gregorio, we are One News.
CHED Chairperson Prospero de Vera says colleges and universities must retrofit their facilities to prepare for the resumption of face-to-face classes. In an interview with 1PH, De Vera said schools should have proper facilities to cater to the new normal. This means that minimum health standards should be observed inside and outside the classrooms. He added that schools should apprise students of their new guidelines.
Ang importante ay doon sa loob ng eskwela merong minimum health protocols na in-observe at na-retrofit yung facility. Pag-approve yan, they can start the next day already. Pag in-approve na for face-to-face classes.
De Vera also said that universities are now preparing for the return of UAAP and NCAA by February next year. However, both organizations are still finalizing training and game guidelines.
Actually, yung guidelines para training of collegiate athletes. Last year pa, early this year pa, approval niya ng IATF. Mukhang agreement o mukhang decision ng AAP at NCAA, tinatarget nila ang games by February. I-require yata ng mga schools, yung athletes lang na vaccinated ang pwedeng sumama sa kanilang games. At yung venue ay gagawin nila sa mga eskwelahan at ang plano yata ay walang audience muna para kontrolado nila yung mismong games.
Pfizer has developed a new oral antiviral pill, which they say cuts COVID-19 related hospitalization and death by up to 89%. Just yesterday, Pfizer has stopped its clinical trials for Paxlovid and instead is now planning to send its results to the US FDA to seek an emergency use authorization. Now, according to Pfizer, the drug made up of 3 pills to be given twice daily will reduce the risk of hospitalization and mortality caused by COVID-19 by up to 89% if taken within 3 days of diagnosis.
Within 3 days of the symptoms, you have now 89% protection from disease leading to hospitalization with our medicines. And the data indicate 100% protection from death. And even if you start the medicine 5 days after having contracted the disease COVID-19 with symptoms, you have now 85% protection.
2 online gaming giants unite as Riot Games hit are now available in the Epic Games stores. Players can now download Riot Games' biggest titles, League of Legends and Valorant, among others, from the Epic Games store. But their partnership doesn't end there. League's characters Jinx will also be appearing in Epic Games' Fortnite, making it the first appearance of a LoL character in a game not made by Riot. Now, carbon farming slowly emerges in Australia in an effort to help curb climate change. From tree planting to cattle grazing, Australian farmers are now changing their farming styles as the market for carbon credits grows. Let's listen in.
This ancient species offers one of the best ways to capture and store carbon in rainforests. The native conifers carbon sink land restoration project in far north Queensland was the first in a statewide scheme to generate Australian carbon credits. They've planted 11,000 trees so far and have ambitions to plant millions more over the next decade.
We've chosen to plant native conifers because of their potential to effectively create what we call high-rise carbon. High-rise carbon means they grow very tall. They can lock up more carbon per hectare than any other system. And that's because we can grow lots of them close together and they produce more volume on a per hectare basis than anything else. Even though it takes them quite a while to do that, over the course of 100 years, there's no other system that will produce as much carbon here in the tropics as native conifers.
This project is a legacy project. We're planting intergenerational forests that will still be here in hundreds of years. So we're planting these trees for our children and their children and their children.
One carbon credit is earned for each tonne of carbon dioxide or equivalent that is avoided, reduced or removed from the atmosphere. They can be bought by government bodies or companies to meet promises to curb emissions. Demand is rising as more of them make net zero commitments.
The market is growing, the demand is growing. In particular, at the moment, the price is rising quite sharply, and we're seeing huge interest from both national and international investors in this emerging industry, and it's a good thing because we've spent a lot of the last 10 years, the industry has struggled with low prices.
Planting rainforest trees is just one option. Farmers can also earn credits by changing land management practices. At Goondikum Station in central Queensland, they sell credits achieved by regenerating vegetation and managing cattle grazing.
We entered into carbon farming to improve our environment here on farm, which is helping our underlying land, which is our natural capital base on which we rely to produce quality beef. So by improving our soils, water and pasture, we're seeing a better return on our cattle and less erosion on our capital base, which means a cost saving long term.
The best part about carbon, it gives you a backup on-farm income without any extra outlay. Over a period of 10, 15 years, it gives you an income. That's a bit like a cheque coming in every year. So you can develop more land sensibly, you can educate your children at school, you can set up better water infrastructure like we are at the moment.
Ahead of the COP26 climate summit, the government agreed to target net zero carbon emissions by 2050. Its strategy focuses on investing in low emissions technology, but it fell short of committing to harder short-term targets. Climate experts say the plan lacks detail.
There's a lot that's unclear and uncertain in the roadmap, and I think a part of that is the lack of dates. The nature of business is to innovate. As soon as you have policy that says not only are we headed to net zero by 2050, but we're headed to this reduction by 2030 and 2035 and 2040, then it becomes a race, and business does what business does best. They get creative, they innovate, they compete, and the most effective solutions succeed. So there is an opportunity by putting some clear targets and some requirements in place, which would then start driving new kinds of action, new kinds of innovation, and start driving finance in many respects through carbon crediting or carbon offsetting approaches to places that it needs to go.
The UN says carbon credits and offset schemes provide a useful tool for speeding up climate action. But they also risk giving the illusion of a fix that allows emissions to continue, and the world needs to move away from carbon for good.
And those are the top stories of the hour. Join us later again at 2 in the afternoon as we continue to monitor the day's biggest stories. You can also catch One News on Signal Play app. Register for a free account now at www.signalplay.com and stream One News live anytime, anywhere. I'm Riza Diaz. Mask on, wash hands, and stay safe, Philippines. We are One News.